That's Kenneth Perrin. Wow. Thank you. Wow, what a prayer and music. This man can sing. Oh my gosh. It's such a synchronicity. It was a beautiful synchronicity. What happened is we actually had a cancellation in our schedule. We usually have musicians scheduled quite a ways out. And an individual couldn't make it and kind of got short notice from her that she couldn't be here. And so we were just trying to figure out what to do. And right about the same time we got that notice, Kenneth sent an email to me just out of the blue saying, I moved to Los Angeles and I'd like to sing. I love to sing and come to your church. And he sent me, yeah. So, just a beautiful blessing, and thank you so much for that. In fact, I think if you just want to sing that again, I'll sit down. I don't think I can top that at all. Can I move this away? Will you okay if I just set it down? It's not a problem, okay. Because I'm afraid I would put my eye out. Provide a comic relief for all of you and a black eye for me. So, just give me a moment here. I have to translate this back from Spanish back into English. So before I left, I did a number of talks, and I was explaining to you and sharing with you my process of how I'd been spending more time with my spiritual practice, and it was really paying dividends for me, and I was really feeling much more connected with that presence, much more aware of that divine presence, and really feeling more spacious, and that sense of separation from the good, from God, from whatever, the greater reality of my being, was beginning to dissolve, and I was really loving the progress that I was making. And then I went off on vacation, which is just, an enhancement of the ability to be spacious, and that really did take place for me. I got even deeper into that spacious place, and then the last day of the vacation, pretty much I completely came unraveled. And I want to talk to you today because I think it's really instructive for all of us to know that you don't want someone telling you how enlightened they are, because unless you're enlightened and you just like to hear what that is, or you're not enlightened and you want to know what it would be like. But what we really want to hear is what happens when we go through those difficult times, and then how do we get ourselves back again? Because that's really what the last few days have been about after a rather hard landing when we return from our vacation. So that's kind of what's coming up. But I thought I'd start with this story, kind of a funny story, and it also is instructive for us about we think we know what would be best for us, right? I mean, if I were to interview any of you, you could give me a list of those situations in your life and how you would like them to turn out, how you would like them to tweak them this way or that way, and you really think we know what our best interests are. So this story is sort of illustrative of how that can be not so true. So you may have heard this before, but don't stop me. I'm just going to go ahead and read it anyway. An American investment banker was at the pier of a small coastal Mexican village where we were, when a small boat with just one fisherman docked. And inside the small boat were several large yellowfin tuna. That's the translation thing there. The American complimented the Mexican on the quality of his fish and asked how long it had taken him to catch them. And the fisherman says, well, only a little while. The American then asked, well, why didn't he stay out longer and catch more fish? And the fisherman said he had enough to support his family's immediate needs. The American then asked, but what do you do with the rest of your time? And the fisherman said, well, I sleep late, I fish a little, I play with my children, take siestas with my wife, Maria, stroll into the village each evening where I sip wine and play guitar with my amigos. I have a full and a busy life. The American scoffed. I am a Harvard MBA and I could help you. You should spend more time fishing, and with the proceeds, buy a bigger boat. With the proceeds from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats. Eventually, you would have a fleet of fishing boats. Instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you could sell directly to the processor, eventually opening your own cannery. You would control the product, processing, and distribution. You would need to leave this small coastal fishing village and move to Mexico City, and then LA, and eventually New York City, where you'll run your expanding enterprise. The fisherman scratched his head and he said, but how long will all this take? And the American businessman said, 15 to 20 years, probably. But then what? Asked the fisherman. The American laughed and said, well, that's the best part. When the time is right, you would announce an IPO, sell your company stock to the public, and become very rich. You'd make millions. Millions? Well, then what? The American said, then you would retire, move to a small coastal fishing village. You'd sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take siestas with your wife, stroll to the village in the evening where you could sip wine and play guitar with your amigos. Yeah, you saw that one coming, huh? It's a funny story, and it just reminds us that we think we know what is best for us, and we like to sort of take off on these tangents, and I know that I do. I want to take off on these tangents and what I think is really going to be the outcomes that would be best for my life. And so often, the outcomes that I go after are very, very external. And you and I talk about this all the time, that, you know, what we really, really, really want, what really is the deepest need of our heart, our soul, what satisfies us, you know, not just, you know, in an acute moment of well-being, but in a deep sense of well-being, what satisfies us is not an external event. And that's sometimes really hard for us to wrap our mind around. You know, this Mexican fisherman was already experiencing this well-being. And the voice of the external voice is saying, no, you need to do more so that you'll be happier. And the failing to recognize that there was already a level of well-being. That you know, beneath, you know, the surface mind, which this businessman sort of represents, beneath that surface mind, if he were to become quieter, if he were to become more introspective, insightful, you know, letting go of the notion that a better exterior always makes for a better interior, then he would see what this very simple man had already achieved. And you and I, you know, the metaphors for us is that you and I already are like that fisherman. In our deepest nature, we already have satisfaction. We're already sort of experiencing the life that would be the ideal. I mean, you can call it by any name you want to, nirvana, heaven on earth, whatever. It doesn't really matter what you call it. What matters is that it's intrinsic. It is the way you and I were created. We were made in the image and likeness of the divine, of this presence, of this power, of this love. That is our essential eternal nature. And that's already there. That's already there. So all of this struggling, this acquisition and trying to make life different, you know, if we think that it's attached to that sense of well-being that seems always outside of our reach, just beyond our grasp, then we're missing the spiritual lesson in life. And that's why we need to hear these teachings over and over again. Because left to our default, we will spin new stories and new indicators and new expectations about how life is not lining up for us to give us the grandiose experience that we think is possible for us. So this is always this inward, outward sort of thing. And it's related to this notion that we don't have that much connection to the inner self. And we're very much familiar with the body and the mind and the stories and the biography and the things that we're doing and all the problems in our life. And, you know, that just sort of fills the screen of our life all the time. And unless we find time to go away, to go apart a while, you know, to close the door, as Jesus said, and go within, we don't get in touch with this part of us that's the fisherman, the simple fisherman, who's already living the ideal life, already has access to the ideal, this abode of well-being. So we went on this 9-day trip to Cozumel, Mexico, and it was really beautiful. I mean, I don't know if you know about Cozumel, but it's right on the Caribbean side of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, off of the coast where Cancun is. And it is characterized by the most beautiful turquoise water. Turquoise is my new favorite color now. It just fills my consciousness. And first place we stayed at was right on the beach, and we looked out our window, and there was a pool that was heart-shaped. Oh, how sweet it is. And then just beyond the pool, there's the Caribbean, and this turquoise glory expanse. And the weather was ideal. Every day was like upper 70s and, slightly humid and a little breeze blowing. And it was what, the ego mind would say, this is the perfect experience. This is all so good. And we had these profound meditations. We, deepened our practice while we were there, allowing the spaciousness of time to support our intention, which was to do more spiritual practice while we were there. And when we weren't meditating or swimming or snorkeling, we were, having great meals and, sampling some of the great cuisine that was there. And we'd had friends who'd been there a month already. They were divers, and they had been there the whole month of January. And they knew all the great places to eat and all the great, taco stands and everything. And so we were just eating and taking in all of this sensory delight and just, really floating in nirvana. And we were just so grateful for the time. It was really what we wanted and what we went for, and not filled with a lot of activities. When we got to the last day, we said, let's do some kind of a tour. And we had thought, before we went, we thought we were going to go and do all this stuff and go see the ruins and go to Chichen Itza and Tulum and all those places. Ended up, we were just enjoying the chill, so we didn't do that. But the last day, we decided to take a tour, take a cruise. So what this was a sail, snorkel, sunset cruise on a 65-foot catamaran, which just sounded delightful. You go out on this boat, and they provide all the snorkel equipment. They go out to the two famous reefs that are out there in Cozumel, and snorkel, and then they motor to the next one, and you snorkel again. So we went on this boat, and it was great. The weather was perfect, and we got to, let's see, how do I want to tell this story? I don't want to give it away too soon. Sort of where the stomach turns, as it were. But anyways, it really was ideal. And as we were coming back, after we'd done this snorkeling, as we were coming back, they put the sails up, and the sun was beginning to set. And so we're just coasting. There's no sound except for they had some great music going on, and people were dancing on the boat. Denise and I were, lovey-dovey, and it's just like, oh, this is just the best. It's the best last day. How does it get any better than this, The ego is just like, wow, everything we want. So that's good. So then we came in that night, and we decided to go out to dinner. So we went to this restaurant in town, and it wasn't a great meal, but we were okay. But Denise said, I don't think I'm going to finish my dinner. And usually that doesn't happen with Denise or I. We usually finish a meal that we buy. And she said, I'm just not hungry, or I'm not feeling good. So anyway, we got home, and Denise got very, very sick. And what had happened was on the boat, they said, all the cerveza and the margaritas that you want, and if you don't drink, we have purified water. And Denise doesn't drink, and so she chose the purified water. And apparently, purificación, by their standards, were not quite up to snuff, because she got very, very sick. And this was the night before we were flying out, and she was up all through the night, and that kind of lovely kind of sickness. And I was up with her, and so anyway, we get up the next morning, and we decide we'll start packing up gradually. And at 9:15, there's a knock on the door. We knew we had to be out by 10 o'clock, but at 9:15, there's a knock on the door. Open the door, and there's the maid. And she's saying in broken English, I need to come in, and you need to get out. I need to come in and clean your room. Someone's coming in. And I said, but no, we have till 10 o'clock. And she shows me her watch, and it says 10:15. And Cozumel had decided that they were going to push the clocks forward an hour on February 4th. Who knew? So the bloom is coming off the rose. You understand what I'm saying? We're up all night, with that Denise being sick, and now there's not enough time, so I'm going, okay, well, give us 30 minutes. So she goes, all right. So we're just throwing stuff in the suitcase. Suddenly, that peace and that spaciousness was gone. And now it's like, we just got to get out. We got to get out. And Denise is like, she's laying in bed. She's like, I can't help. I'm so sad. I'm sorry, but I can't. I was like, all right, just stay there. So I'm packing her stuff and my stuff and all this food that people had given us while we were there. We're just kind of pitching everything. So finally we get out, and I helped Denise to the car. We've got this old Volkswagen. I think it was like a 1962 Volkswagen or something with a new paint job, on the outside. But we went to the American version of a rent-a-wreck, so that we could get a car for $30 a day. So we did that. Anyway, so we pile all our stuff in there. We barely be able to get in. And so I'm driving to the car rental place. And we get to the car rental place, and the guy says, I said, can you take us to the airport? And he goes, yeah. I go, great. I said, where's the van? He goes, oh, no. And he points to the Volkswagen. So I'm like moving all this stuff around, piling it up, so that this relatively skinny hombre could get in the back seat of the car, and I could drive to the airport. So we get to the airport. Denise is really feeling bad. And what do you do? So she has a yoga mat. So she puts her yoga mat down on the floor. And so she's like, her back's on the floor, and then her legs are up on the chair like this. And she laid there for 2.5 hours, waiting for the flight to take off. So we get on the first flight. We zoom off to Dallas, and then there's a 3-hour layover in Dallas. So we're there for 3 hours. Denise is still doing the yoga posture of 2 feet up on the chair in the back. And it's kind of like the sick word dog, I guess you would call it. Sick as a dog position. And so anyway, so that's that. And we get on the plane. We're both really just tired and exhausted. And so we get on that last flight to LA. And so that's smooth. We could get to LA. It's 3.5 hours, whatever it is. And we land, and we get our luggage, and we get on our phones, and we're going to call for Uber. You get a ride from Uber. And some of you probably know this, but it comes up, it says, Uber is not available at LAX. Oh, what? Why? So we'll just use the Lyft. So we do the Lyft thing. Lyft is not available in LAX. So now we're like, what? So we can't believe it, but what do you do? So we schlep our luggage all out to the ground transportation by the curb, and there's a cab stand. So we said, well, I guess we'll just take a cab because we have to go to Pasadena, which is where our car is. So the cab pulls up, and we said, how much is it going to cost to go to Pasadena? He says, well, probably $75, $80, something like that. So Denise goes, we're not going to pay that. And I said, well, what are we going to do? It's like midnight, according to our clock. So I said, let's just do it, what the heck. So we said, all right, so go. So we get to Pasadena, and the meter says $118.95. I said, well, I suppose you said 75. Well, yeah, it's approximation. What do you, sometimes it's that much, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But hey, he's kind of like giving me the attitude. And I said, well, you're not getting a tip. So anyway, that was all I could muster. So pay him and get all luggage right by our car. And he takes off. And Denise has got the clicker for the car. And she clicks it. And she says, the door won't open. And I said, oh, give me the key. And then we open the door, stick the key in the ignition. Nothing. Car is dead as a doornail. So battery is gone. So now it's like, well, okay, here we are at the extended stay. Shall we extend our stay and stay another day? And, and she said, yeah, let's just do that. And I said, I don't think I want to schlep all our stuff upstairs and then do all that. And then the next morning, we got to bring it all back. And we still have to deal with the car in the morning. Let's just deal with the car tonight. Okay. So usually our conversations don't go that well. But in the weakened state, somehow it was just very agreeable. I wasn't taking advantage of her. I was doing the right thing. So we called AAA. AAA comes out and, boom, 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 get us going. And we take off. And I had to stop at Starbucks. Now, I hadn't drank much coffee. I told you I was on this detox program. I hadn't drunk much of anything. But that cup of coffee made me very awake for the drive home, which was good because it was 2 o'clock by the time we got home. So we got in. So was all that. So, all was well. Denise is recovering. It took her a couple of days. She's fine. No loss. We lost a little bit of money. So what? So all of that putting all that in context, it's like, yeah, no big deal. But what I notice is the next day, and then the day after that, I'm getting progressively sadder. I'm beginning to, something is happening, and I don't know. It's like the rug got pulled out from under my consciousness. All of that joy and that well-being and that sense of spaciousness and feeling, connected to the truth of my being and everything, somehow it was going away. It was like, you're laying in an air mattress and someone pulls the plug out, and I'm deflating here, and I have no explanation. I have no explanation. So, what you do in those moments is inquire, right? You ask, what's going on here? And there was a part of me, that part of me that thinks I'm really enlightened and wise and above all that wouldn't hear this little explanation. The explanation was this. You allowed those events that happened to convince you that you're very vulnerable. Your well-being and your happiness and your sense of peace and joy and everything are only as good as your circumstances will support that sort of experience. That's a very conditional kind of enlightenment that you've got going on. So I wouldn't allow myself to think that, right? But that is exactly what happened. Because re-entry for me was, we went from this spaciousness, it's almost like being out in outer space in this weightlessness experience, and then coming back and having all these events happening one after another was like feeling the effects of gravity, greater and greater weight and pressure and constraint upon the consciousness. And I had that is just what happened. I mean, that just was the reality. And I had a chance to see that still happens to me. And that is going to still be part of my process. But here's where it turns. Here's where it turns. And I want to share with you one of my favorite lessons from A Course in Miracles, which is lesson 79, which says, let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. A problem cannot be solved if you do not know what it is. Even if it is really solved already, you still have the problem because you will not recognize that it has been solved. This is the situation that we have. The problem of separation, which is really the only problem we have, has already been solved. Yet the solution is not recognized because the problem is not recognized. This is so profound. And when I got this again, I realized that although all these sort of machinations of my ego had taken me from this lofty, connected place of well-being, I allowed that to happen. What was so assuring to me was that all sort of happened in the mind. It all happened as like a journey of illusion, of a journey of forgetfulness in which I went off into a far country and forgot who I was, and thought that I was subject to all of these events and circumstances of life, and that those were all the determiners of my well-being and of my enlightenment. And then just to hear again that there's no way that we can be separate from God. There's no way that we can be separate from the divine presence. There's just no way, because we are its very expression. We are made in its image and likeness. We are it. And the journey is, it's like the prodigal son and daughters of life, that just, we take these journeys away and thinking that circumstances and conditions and people and everything have some sort of control over our well-being, in which that's only an illusion. It's only that which our ego mind, our separated sense of self, allows to happen. But it never really happens. It can't happen. Who I am, what I'm connected to, what is always my reality is always my reality. And so the journey from that point, when I landed in that awareness, like, let me realize that the problem, let me realize what the problem is. I realized there is no problem. I created the problem, which is a really good thing. Because what if the universe had created the problem? And I had no control over the universe. Does anyone have control over the universe besides me? That I don't. I mean, I don't have control over the universe. But if we don't have this, if we can't exercise control over what we think is causing our upset, then doesn't that put us in a very much of a victim place? That if we feel that people are responsible for us feeling loved and objects are responsible for us having well-being and feeling enough, and other people's opinions of us really matter as to how we feel about ourselves. If all of that is true, aren't we in trouble? But the spiritual answer, God is the answer, no matter what the question is that can't possibly be. That cannot possibly be. Because the answer is that we are always connected with that presence, that power, that love. Paul said, in God you live and move and have your very being. There is nothing more true about you than that. So whatever story what I want to spin, whatever illusion that I want to create around how life, determines my well-being, in any given moment, I can come to myself. Yes? I can recall, I can remember the truth. And yeah, it may take a while. It took me a couple of days. And I was kind of sad around here. I was here in the office Thursday and Friday, and I'm trying to put on a happy face. People said, "How was your vacation?" "That was great." I wasn't exuding any joy because I was just letting that incident at the end it wasn't what happened. Do you understand what I'm saying? It was I was feeling guilty for feeling bad about what happened. It's this, in Buddhism, that's like the second arrow. First is, you feel bad for whatever, you're depressed, you're sad. And then the second arrow is you shouldn't feel that way. So you already feel bad. Here comes another one. Oh, I shouldn't be feeling that way. I should be more enlightened. And, you're a spiritual leader. You teach this stuff all the time. What the hell's wrong with you? This boom, 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 boom. Down on the floor, down on the floor. So we do it. I do it. You do it. We all do it. But we can all come back. And I know that there are some things that I can never, ever predict in my life. I will never be able to predict all the things that will change in my life and all of the challenges that are going to arise in my life. Do you? Do you have any sense of being able to know? And even if you knew, would you be able to stop them or control them or manipulate them so that life would give you? But the one thing that you can know is that to know what the problem is and to know that the problem has already been solved. Because any experience of life not according to your preferences in terms that causes you upset or difficulty or challenge is a decision that you make that can be reversed. When we go back to the realization that God and I are a majority. No matter how it piles up, and it can pile up at times, right? Life can be kind of challenging and difficult. But you are not your body, and you are not your circumstances, and you are not your biography, and you're not what other people think of you, and you're not how many degrees you have, or how little education you have, or how much money you have, or how little money you have, or all those variable things that life will continue to be unfolding and throwing at us left and right, and saying, "Where are you grounded in, grasshopper? What do you know to be so?" And it may take a day or two, because you sort of have to work off the dross of that illusion. Because it has stickiness, doesn't it? It wants to cling. It clings to you. It wants to attach itself as your identity. No, you are the victim. You were the victim, that cab driver. Did you see what he charged you and you just paid him? That kind of energy. You can go right down that road. Or what that country's coming to, the government, what they're doing, and how much I'm paying in taxes, and what the insurance is now. Oh my God. You can just create problems upon problems upon problems. But whatever the problem is, it's already been solved. Because you and me are one with that love and that presence and that power. It can be no other way. And when we sit in that awareness, and then we emerge from that awareness, and we bring that energy to life, then we have a certain invulnerability. We have an ability to reclaim the joy I mean, I know people, and I know you too, do as well, who have lost grand things in life that we have not suffered. And they have made that reconnection. They have discovered that the problem has been solved and emerged from that challenge, that difficulty. People have lost limbs and eyes and all kinds of things and loved ones, and they find that truth again because it's there. It's irrefutable. It is there. It is what we are. And when we can touch back into that, and then we bring that truth back to our life, we come back with fullness. We come back with experience, which is good, one that you can share, as I'm sharing with you. That it isn't always going to be, light shows and happy, happy, joy, joy. But when it falls off, we know the answer is not to try to go and fix the world. It's about making sure that we get reconnected with that spirit that is within us, that sense of connection with the divine, which is always the answer, and the answer has already been given, because in truth we never were separate from God. It never happened, only in the illusory mind. And that part of us is malleable and changeable and can be reversed so we can come back to the truth. Yeah? Yes. Okay. Namaste. Glad to be back.